It is the top of the hour here, 5 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining CTD for our webinar, Wearables as Supports for Executive Functioning and Independence. We are pleased to introduce our speaker, Luis Perez, a Technical Assistance Specialist for the National Center on Accessibility Educational Materials. Without further ado, we are ready when you are, Luis. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for that nice introduction. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I know some of you have some snow where you live, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this webinar this evening, where we're going to look at wearables and how they can support a range of different learners with their executive functioning and increasing their independence. So before we get going here, I just want to know if you already own a wearable and what kind of wearable it is. So I'll give you a minute or two in the chat area. Just let me know what do you have that you're already using in terms of wearables. But also, if you don't know what a wearable is, that's okay. We can discuss that as well. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, so we have a few people here with the Apple Watch. That's great. I have one on my wrist right now. The NIM ring for emergencies, that's one that I'm not familiar with, Sarah, so you may need to explain that one. And again, there's quite a few things out there. So these are all devices that you'll have on your wrist, you might have in your pocket, but they tend to be an extension of your smartphone and allow you to get information in different ways. So we have smartwatch. There's a link there for the NIM. Great, very good. Karen has the Revive, which I'll mention in my presentation. Awesome. So just keep contributing in the chat. I want to make sure this is as much of a conversation as possible. But before we get to the technology, I do want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about executive functioning. So just like you did a second ago in the chat area, when we talked about what you have already, what's your definition of executive functioning? So if you had to explain it to somebody who's new to this concept, how would you explain that? So I'll give you a minute or so to do that. I see a few of you typing, so Kelly says that's something she doesn't have at this time of the day. Well, yeah, I mean it's an infinite, it's not an infinite resource, right? You can sort of tap it out if you've had a long day that require you to do a lot of planning and so on. So let's see. So what is executive functioning? And it can be a really simple definition. It doesn't have to be anything too complex yet. Karen says difficulties with distraction, impulse control, organization. Someone's logged in as a guest is processing, thinking, planning, and basically how you get through the day. These are all great definitions, so keep those coming. Volition, planning, organization, great. All right, so now that you've provided some of these definitions, let me just share with you how I define it. This is my personal definition. So to me, executive functioning is a set of brain-based skills that are required for human beings to get things done. So in order to set a goal and be able to accomplish it, you got to do all of those things that you mentioned in the chat. You have to plan, you have to get yourself organized, you have to be able to make use of information, and so on. And now I only mention this because I do have a teenage daughter. So for me, another way that I put this is the executive functioning is the get the kids out of the house skills. And I know that sounds cruel, but I say that in love, because really what we want to do is kind of build them up to be independent adults who are able to, go through life on their own. So I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm saying that out of love. It's the get the kids out of the house and get them to become independent, productive adults and people who can get things done. So in terms of the brain, the executive functioning skills are basically directed by the frontal lobe, which is in the front of the brain. And if we think about it in terms of UDL, this is part of the strategic network. So it's a network that's involved in planning, organizing, directing motor actions. So the strategic network is involved whenever you're, let's say, solving a math problem in the classroom, or you're following a set of instructions in order to do a task. The strategic network is involved in directing all of those motor actions and planning for them. And there's lots of different ways to visualize what the executive functions are. These are some ways that I visualize it. It's the part of the brain that's the air traffic controller. It keeps everything going and flowing smoothly so that you can get from point A to point B in accomplishing a task. Or another way to look at it, it's a traffic cop as well. And then one last one. This is my favorite. It's the brain CEO. And so basically, just like you have an organization that has somebody at the top who's kind of the leader of the organization, it sets the person who sets the goals, and then kind of directs everybody else. So everybody's kind of pushing in the same direction to accomplish that goal. Well, it's the same thing with your brain. Your brain has sort of a CEO or a director. And so part of this presentation is we all vary when it comes to our ability to exercise those executive functions. So in terms of the skills that I mentioned, those brain-based skills, you can divide them into two categories, cognitive and behavior. But that's just kind of make them easier to learn or remember, because they're both sort of intertwined and they can affect each other. So it's not strictly cognitive or strictly behavior. There's an interplay there. But this is one way to think about it. There's all kinds of different ways that people organize the different executive functioning skills. So I want to ask you, what are some areas, and somebody already mentioned this, at the end of a long day where you've had your executive functioning has been at work really hard. You may not be as fresh as you were this morning at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, but what are some areas that you're strong in, and then what are some areas that you struggle with when it comes to executive functioning? And by extension of that, is this something that you're asking your learners? Because they may also not be aware of those things that are strong in and those that they need some support with. So planning and organizing, seeing the forest for the trees. Yep, some people can get really caught up. I'm one of those. I get caught up in the details, and it takes me a while to kind of step back and see the big picture. Long-term scheduling, says person going by A. Gomez, I'm going to say. To-do lists for Kelly are helpful support. So again, they kind of keep you on track. You don't have to use your limited working memory to juggle all those tasks in your mind, right? You can use the support like a checklist. Managing distractions. So again, I just wanted to ask that question, put it out there, because one of the key, the cornerstones of universal design for learning is learner variability. And it's the idea that we all vary, right? We're all on a continuum when it comes to these skills, these capabilities. So we may be strong in some areas, but we may struggle in others. I want to share this resource with you. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with understood.org, but they have a really nice explanation of executive functioning. So if you want to go to that link, it's bit.ly, bit.ly / executive function 1, the number 1. And we'll see if we can put that into the chat area, make it easier for you. But Understood is a great organization. They do a lot of work around learning and attention and how we can support that in the classroom. And even though it's oriented at the classroom, there are other areas where this can be helpful as well. It's not just the classroom, especially as our learners make the transition to higher education or the workforce or whatever their path is in life. This is something that they will need, these skills they will need moving forward. So organizations like Understood.org are doing a great job of providing information and supports. All right, so here's the part that you came for. But I wanted to provide that background on executive functioning, just in case. I don't want to assume that you all have background knowledge in this area. So that was just kind of a quick overview, but again, at a place like Understood.org, or even our own, cast.org, cast.org, whom I work for now, we have some resources there as well related to executive functioning. But the next thing, once you realize, that you may need supports in one area, is it's nice to know that technology can help. So technology can provide some cues through the use of notifications, and those kind of notifications can be provided to you in a variety of ways. It could be either through sound, it could be through vibration, which I'd really prefer, because then it's a little bit more discreet. You can get the information in a way that doesn't disturb other people and also doesn't let them know that you need to do something. And so you could be in a meeting and you can get that notification through vibration. You can use technology, of course, to create visual schedules for yourself. And that can sort of break down a big project into smaller steps. You can do a task analysis and use that visual schedule to stay on track. And then probably the most important for me is information management. I don't know how many of you are like me, but I will misplace things from time to time. And one of the things that's nice about technology, especially with the cloud now, is you can store things in one central location so that you're not always losing things. Unfortunately, that means that the excuse of, I lost my homework or whatever doesn't hold as well now. So, there are lots of places where you can store information safely. So one of the supports, one of the ways that technology can support executive functioning is with a wearable. It's something that most of us, put on from the moment we wake up in the morning, and we keep it on until the day comes to an end. And so it's basically with us most of the day. And so it can provide those notifications, those reminders to get things done, and so on. So I did prepare a handout for you. So even if we don't get through everything tonight, you can access that handout, and it has a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about. So I created a short URL for that. It's bit.ly, bit.ly. You can see a pattern there. I kind of like bit.ly. And then it's /wearables and then CTD. And that is case sensitive, so it has to be typed exactly as it appears in the URL. But I see Ana Maria is going to put it into the chat area as well. All right, so let's get started with some of the wearables that I'm going to talk about tonight. The first obvious one, or one that sometimes we take for granted, is our fitness devices. And this is not even the full lineup from companies like Fitbit and Garmin. They're always coming out with new devices that you can purchase, but they range in price from anywhere $50 all the way to a couple hundred. And so this may be something that you've started a fitness program, and so you may already have one of these. Depending on the device that you have, it may have the ability to provide alerts, to provide notifications. So if you already have a fitness device, look into the settings in the app, because usually they have an app that you use to configure the device and set it up. And so see if you can enable an alert or an alarm. And so that's one really helpful support besides the fitness aspect of these devices. And as Adina made a great point there, that some of these devices, they'll be around for a couple of years, and then they'll disappear, like the beloved Pebble. I don't know how many of you had a Pebble, but that was one of the earliest smartwatches. And it had quite a following, but then it was bought by Fitbit. So Fitbit bought the Pebble, and now Fitbit also has its own smartwatch, the Fitbit, I think it's Ionic. So again, fitness devices, a good place to start if you want something that's not too expensive and that you can get multiple uses out of, not just fitness, but those alerts and notifications. And then there are dedicated notifiers. This is one that I own. It's called the Ditto, and it lasts quite a long time with the battery. In fact, the one that I have, I haven't changed the battery yet. And the reason for that is there's no screen, and the screen is usually the part of a wearable or a device that consumes the most battery. So this just provides vibrating alerts. And you could either put it in your pocket, or you can add a strap to it if you want to wear it on your wrist. So it's just a very simple device, and it's just for notifications, and that's it. There's no screen, so there's no way that you can really interact with it. Most of the interactions through the app on your smartphone. They're also kind of related to that. There's some focus aids, and here are a couple of those. Focus Labs Revive, and that's a pretty interesting device. It's about $100. And with all of these, I'm always hesitant to provide a price because it changes from time to time. There's sales and so on, especially if a new model is coming out. But whenever I can remember it, I'll mention the price. But the Focus Labs Revive, this is supposed to be a focus aid. It provides vibration on an interval. So the idea is that as you're working, every once in a while, your attention may wander. And so this will provide a nice gentle vibration to remind you to kind of get back on task, get back to what you were supposed to be doing. And then the time timer just gives you a visual. So you see a disc, and that disc indicates how much time you have left, how much time has elapsed. So it's a nice reminder of, especially if you struggle with sort of estimating time and staying on track in that way. So, and as Linda said, the Revive could be a reminder to just breathe, which is important. Yeah, just take a breath every once in a while and let the tension kind of, flow through your body. For me, actually, these reminder tools, actually, I'm visually impaired. And one of the things is as I'm looking at the screen right now, it does train my vision. And so if I stay looking at the same point, my eyes start to get watery and tired. So I use these reminder tools to remind me to just look up to a different spot in the room. And that way my eyes don't get as tired, or just take a break every once in a while. This is actually pretty exciting since I mentioned I'm visually impaired, so I know a little bit about this area. But there's a watch called the DOT, D-O-T. And it basically is a watch that uses Braille to communicate the time. So this is specifically for people that are blind and that know how to read Braille. In addition to the time, you can get some notifications. The one thing that I observe, it is a little bit bigger than your typical watch, but I'm sure as the technology improves, it's going to continue to get smaller and more portable. I didn't include it on the slides, but I also wanted to mention, I'll type it into the chat area. This is one that I've been able to try. It's called the Sunu Band, S-U-N-U. And that's also a wearable that's specifically designed for people who are blind. And it's so cool. It's basically a band that you wear on your wrist. So it looks almost like a Fitbit. But it has a sonar signal that comes out of it. And it's meant for white cane users. So as you're walking around with your white cane, you're pointing your wrist in the same direction, and this band will emit a sonar signal that then bounces off the obstacles in front of you. And it helps you with navigation. It helps you avoid those obstacles in front of you. So this is something that's still in development, but you can actually purchase it. I'll see if I can, actually I have the link in the handout. So just take a look in the handout. You'll see the Sunu Band. It's won a couple of awards for innovation, new technology for the blind. So I love to see things like that come out. We don't think of these as wearables, right? But these have been really helpful to me. Object tracking. So let's say you're always losing your wallet or misplacing your wallet or the remote or whatever it may be that you have difficulty finding. You have things like Tile or Tracker, and so you can attach these to those objects or your keys, for instance. And from your smartphone, you can ping those items, and then you can get sound notification of where they are. And I have to tell you, the Tile has already, saved me more than once. I almost didn't make a flight because I forgot something at home and had to run back for it. And I had very limited time to find it once I got home and got back on my ride sharing car. And so with the Tile, as soon as I walked in the door, I was able to ping the wallet that I had left, and then I was able to go right to it, pick it up, get back in my ride sharing ride, and then I finally made it to the airport. So these are in the range of $20 to $25. So if you think about, a $300 flight that I would have missed, I think it more than paid for itself. So it's just a helpful aid. But one thing that I did discover though is these will last only for about a year because they have a battery on them, and the battery runs out in about a year. In fact, the app will remind you that it's time to renew. And the best time to buy these is around the holidays because they'll usually have a pack of them. You can get 3 or 4 of them, and the price is much lower. So just be aware of that they're not serviceable. You can't take out the battery with these trackers. Not all of them. There are a few. I think the Tracker one you actually can, but the Tile one that I have, I know that I can't do that. So I need to plan for buying new ones at the end of the day, or the year, I should say. And this is a category that I'm really excited about, hearables. So the aftershocks on the left, those are bone conduction headphones. What that means is that instead of covering your ears like typical headphones, you actually wear them over your ears, and then the pads of the aftershocks kind of rest right on your temple, and it uses the bones in your head to transmit the audio signal. So you can listen to content. It could be a podcast, it could be music, while your ears are not covered. And so as a person with a visual impairment, that means I can walk around and I can get information from, say, my screen reader, while at the same time I can hear the ambient audio or the ambient noise, and that keeps me safe while I'm walking around. And so Aftershocks is just one of the companies that makes these. There's a number of them out there. And what's great about this is runners use them quite a bit. So originally it was developed as an assistive aid. A lot of blind people were using them. But it's really taken off with runners because you want to be able to, hear your podcast or hear your music, but at the same time, you want to stay safe. You want to be aware of the cars or anything that's in the environment that could cause you harm. And then on the right here, we have the made for iPhone hearing aids. And this is just really, really cool technology, but really expensive, which all hearing aids are expensive to begin with. But what this lets you do is you can send the audio from your iPhone right to your hearing aid. So that could be a YouTube video, that could be anything you can play on your device. You can redirect that audio signal from your phone to your hearing aids. And then you can also even set presets so that you can have a preset for a busy restaurant or a different preset for, say, the library. And those presets can come on based on your location. So as you walk into that busy restaurant, your hearing aids adjust to that environment. But the coolest feature for learning is something called Live Listen. And with Live Listen, what you can do is you can put the phone in the front of the classroom. So this is really helpful in higher education where you have these massive auditoriums. You can put the phone in the front of the classroom, and then it sends the signal that it's picking up from the microphone on the phone all the way to your hearing aid wherever you're sitting in the classroom. So it's basically like an FM system in a way, but it's just using your iPhone as the microphone and then sending it right into your hearing aid. And by the way, they are actually not just made for iPhone hearing aids. There is one company, and I'll see if I can find the name, that's making a cochlear implant that has the same capabilities as these made for iPhone hearing aids. So lots of progress being made in this category of hearables. So I'm excited about that. There's a few devices for kids, and so this is a great way to get them started with wearables. So you're not spending several $100s, right? These are all typically under $100 or so. But you can see the Tech Kitty Zoom just has some basic apps that kids can use. And then some of these are really meant more for safety, like the Gizmo Pal or the Tiny Tail, to where there are a few numbers programmed into them, and then the child can use it to, call home, call caregiver. So they're somewhat limited on purpose because they just have one function, which is basically to keep the kids connected to those that need to know where they are. And some have even a GPS built in, so you can track them. I wish I had that earlier, when my daughter is still a minor. Let's see. Pat said we have purchased the Gizmo. Yeah, that's the issue. Sometimes when it's turned off, it won't work. But here's another option for that tracking, and this is especially helpful for adults. Sometimes they'll resist wearing something that's visible or that they know it's there. But these smart soles, you can just slip them into their shoes, and then whenever they're wearing those shoes, you can track where they are using GPS. So lots of really cool stuff being developed out there. So before we go on to a smartwatch, let's see if you have any of these that you're using. What's been your experience? Any that you would like to try that sound like they would help you? Somebody said, reminds me of Black Mirror in terms of tracking, but this is it's not for everybody, right? There's specific use cases. So I can think with a smart soul, it might be a situation where you have a relative who has Alzheimer's, and so they tend to wander, or somebody with autism that wanders, and so it's just a tool that you can use to for a little bit of peace of mind, knowing that they're not going to go out and get in trouble. Pat says she knows a family using the Apple Watch, enjoying some of the benefits. So we're going to look at that next. So keep that in mind, Pat, and then feel free to share some of the information. The insoles, you can click on that link right above Adina, and it'll show you how much they are. They're not that cheap. If I remember correctly, it was a couple $100s. All right. I get it. You're really interested in the Apple Watch. I'm going to move on to that next. So, smartwatches. There are several categories of smartwatches. There's the Apple Watch. Android Wear is a little bit different in that there's a number of companies that make Android Wear watches. Android Wear is just the operating system. So you have companies like Motorola that's made Android Wear based smartwatch in the past. And so on. And then Samsung, because they want to be special, they have their own operating system, which is it's kind of based on Android. It's called Tizen, Tizen. So these are really the three big categories of smartwatches. I myself use an Apple Watch. That's what I have on my wrist right now. So why did I choose the Apple Watch? The main reason is that it's the most accessible wearable that there is. Apple has a long track record when it comes to accessibility, starting on the Mac, and then the iPhone, the iPad, and now, of course, the Apple Watch. Also, I found that it has the biggest and most diverse app store in terms of the apps that are available for the Apple Watch. Although the idea of using apps on your wrist, I think that's sort of falling out of favor. And that kind of gets at my next point. Sometimes I know that I've thought this sometimes. Does it do too much? Like, do we need basically the equivalent of a shrunken iPhone on our wrist? And for some people, the answer may be yes, it does too much. So they just want something that provides notifications, that provides alerts. But again, you can choose. I think Apple is really refocusing the Apple Watch away from the apps a little bit and more into the notifications and the fitness, if you look at a lot of their commercials. And then, of course, battery life. This is really, really the part that I would like to see improved a lot more. Because I have the older version 1, so there's different versions of the Apple Watch. I've heard from other people that have the version 3, which is the latest one, that the battery life has improved. But it's still something that you're going to have to charge, every day or every day and a half or so. And especially if you travel, it's another thing that you have to remember to bring that cable, because it's not a common cable. It's got its own dedicated charger. So that's one thing that's kind of a drawback. But again, there's so many other things that are benefits that that may be just kind of something you're willing to sort of trade off. In terms of some of the killer apps that I found with the Apple Watch, this is one of my favorites. The fact that I can get directions using haptics. And haptics is just another way of saying vibration. So on your Apple Watch, if you go into settings and then general and find sound and haptics, a couple of things here. You can change the strength of that vibration. And so that's what that haptic strength setting is. And then if you're that person that you really need it to be a little bit stronger when it vibrates, or else you miss that alert, you can turn on prominent haptics. So it's just going to increase the force of the vibration a little bit, so that you're not as likely to miss it when it comes on. And so that can be used for notifications, but it also can be used for maps. So for me, this is just a huge thing in terms of independence and being able to move around independently. You can look up directions on your iPhone, and then as you are driving or as you're walking somewhere, the watch can vibrate in different patterns to let you know when it's time to turn right or when it's time to turn left. And so you can do it on the phone. You can look up the directions on the phone, and then the Apple Watch, because it's connected to the phone, it's kind of tethered to it. It just picks up that information, and then it gives you the turn-by-turn directions using haptics. Or you can do it on the watch itself, as these screenshots show. So you can search, and then once you find, you can tell I needed some Starbucks when I took these screenshots. So you can find different locations of Starbucks in this case. You can see the hours, the rating for that location, and then it kind of gives you an approximation how long it's going to take you to get there. And then once you start, you'll see the visual, so you can flick up your wrist. You'll see, something like turn right in 390 feet. But also, if you just, don't need to look at it or don't want to look at it on the watch, you can just follow along with the vibration patterns, left or right. I use this feature quite a bit, even when I'm in the car, and I don't drive, by the way, so don't worry about that. Everybody on the road is safe. But maybe the navigator. And so if I've looked up the directions for the other person, then I can follow along with the watch. For me, this is also really important, is I use ride sharing a lot. That's the way that I get places. That's how I get to the airport. That's how I get different places that I need to go, doctor's appointments and the like. And so I can, call an Uber, call a Lyft. They both have Apple Watch apps. And then, I can get updates on my Apple Watch as that ride is about to arrive, and so on. So it's just between those two options, the haptic vibration for navigation in the environment, and then the ability to track your ride. These are things that really increase the independence for people who have low vision, like myself, or are completely blind. For motor, there's Apple Pay. So with Apple Pay, you can, obviously the vendor has to support it. But once you find a vendor that you use, or you have a credit card that supports this, you can set it up on your iPhone. And then when you walk up to the terminal, you can just sort of pay with the Apple Watch. You don't even have to take out your credit card. You don't have to fumble with a credit card. You can just basically, it works on the proximity of the watch to that terminal. So you basically bring it close to the terminal. And what's nice about this, it's pretty secure because it's not actually exchanging the credit card number. It creates a token for each individual transaction. So it's not only really convenient and helpful for somebody who just needs a different way to pay that's a little bit more accessible, but it's also very secure. Just curious, any of you use Apple Pay in the chat? And what's your experience with it? My biggest challenge has been finding places that support it. But there's an increasing list of those where you can pay using your wrist. I see a few of you typing. That's great. While you do that, let us know about Apple Pay. These are all different options that are built in already that you may want to check out. I use Siri quite a bit to interact with my Apple Watch. There's a lot you can do with just Siri, so that saves you from having to do a lot of swiping, a lot of tapping. I'll mention a few apps that use or make use of Siri. I love the dock. I'll talk about the dock separately in just a second, but it's just another way that you can access your most frequently used or favorite apps without having to navigate that small honeycomb of apps on the home screen. Nightstand, you can place your Apple Watch on its side while it's charging, and basically you get a simplified display. It's really nice. You can tap on it at night and see what the time is and so on. And then the other options here, like the heart rate app, the breathe app. I think somebody mentioned earlier, every once in a while it's nice to take a break. And I love the breathe app because it gives you a visual, but also uses vibration to help you slow down your breathing. So if you're having a tough day, this is a great way to just, kind of go out back and just take a second out of the day and slow down your breathing and meditate for a little bit. Great for self-regulation as well. All right, so accessibility features, I'm not going to cover these in detail, but I am going to share with you a resource that I created where you can learn more. As I mentioned, on the Apple Watch itself, you have a number of accessibility options you can turn on. There's a full-feature screen reader, just like there is on the iPhone, called VoiceOver. There's magnification, called Zoom, and with Zoom you can use the digital crown to zoom in and out, or you can use gestures. And those gestures, just to account for the fact that you don't have a lot of space, you can double tap with two fingers to zoom in and out. You can turn off some of the animation. So if you're somebody who's sensitive to motion, you can do that here. That's what that reduce motion setting is. And then you can turn on the on-off labels in addition to just using color. Not everybody can perceive the color. And so you can add an additional visual cue, which is a 1 or a 0, to let you know whether something's turned on or off. So those are the main settings for accessibility on the watch itself. But you can also go onto the phone, and there's a My Watch app, and that's where you do a lot of the configuration for the Apple Watch. And so there's a section on there called General Accessibility, and so you have additional options there for grayscale, reducing the transparency, and much more. The other thing that I've highlighted here is you can enable an accessibility shortcut. So let's say that you use Zoom a lot or you use VoiceOver a lot. Well, you can set up the accessibility shortcut so that the crown, when you triple click it, or you triple press it, I should say, turns on that feature. So that way you don't have to navigate through a bunch of menus. So the crown, the digital crown on the side of the Apple Watch, becomes a shortcut of sorts. Now, I said I was going to share a resource with you. I have created a number of videos. And so these videos demonstrate VoiceOver, Zoom, all of those accessibility options. So if you access this playlist, it's bit.ly/, and then Apple Watch Access. And that will give you access to those videos so that you can see this in action. And even though I'm using an older Apple Watch, these have not really changed that much. They're basic features that are built into the Apple Watch. So whether it's version 1, which is or version 0, I guess now, the original Apple Watch, or you have the latest one, version 3, These features are going to work in a very similar way. All right, so let's talk about apps. So apps, basically, remember these. There's a connection between the iPhone and the Apple Watch. So you purchase these apps on the App Store, right? They're basically iPhone apps. It's just that the developer has put in an extension that then, allows the phone and the Apple Watch to communicate with each other. And so the Apple Watch can display information from the phone, and it can also send information to the phone. Now, the version 3 that just came out not too long ago in the fall does have an LTE radio on it. And so you can do a few things without, requiring the connection to the phone. So, for instance, you can take phone calls, you can stream music. However, it's an additional $10 a month for the data plan. So I'm not too keen on that. I don't know how many of you are. But anyway, there is a little bit more independence from the phone if you're using that latest Apple Watch, the version 3. Now, my friend Stacy, who may be on the call, I don't know, there's a long list here, but she may be on the call, Stacy Driscoll, who is an expert in this area as well, executive functioning, and there she is, Stacy. Hi, Stacy. Say hi in the chat. She's an expert in executive functioning as well as wearables. Her and I, we created this Apple Watch app matrix. And I think Ana Maria said that you can also click on the link on the screen, and that will also take you to this app matrix. So it will show you some of these apps and some of the needs that the apps address, because that's the main thing, is thinking about, okay, what is the area that either you yourself need some help with, some support with, or the person that you're working with. What is the area that they need support in, and does the device do that? And with the Apple Watch, it's not a dedicated device. It's a really flexible one where you can install a range of apps. So look through the matrix and see if you can find one that matches your needs. But I am going to discuss a few that I use myself, and then I'm also going to cover a few strategies that I found helpful. But before I do that, one of the things that's I found really helpful is the dock. So this was introduced in watchOS 3, and what it does is it allows you to determine up to 10 favorite apps. And what's nice about it is you can access them by pressing the side button. I don't know if those of you who have an Apple Watch, you probably agree with me that it's kind of difficult to navigate the honeycomb where all of the apps show up. So with the dock, you can designate up to 10 of these apps. They're updated more frequently, so when you launch them from the dock, they kind of open up fairly quickly. You can remove some of the apps in the dock just by swiping to the left, and you'll see a remove option. And then if you freed up a slot, so if you have less than 10, then when you tap the side button and the dock comes up, you can press and hold, and you can save additional ones in there. So it's just basically a shortcut that allows you to get to your favorites, your favorite apps, without having to go through that honeycomb. It's more of a usability feature for the Apple Watch. So my big tip for executive functioning is see how much you can do with Siri. It just really speeds up what you can do with the Apple Watch. A lot of these apps support it. The first 3 that I'm going to cover, of course, are built in. So the timer, you can just pull up Siri, right? You press the digital crown, so that little button on the side with the circular one, not the rectangular one. You press it and hold it down, you can use your voice, and so you can set up timers, and then you can go into the app and you can do things like customize it. But if it's a really simple timer, your voice should be more than enough. You can set alarms, and what's nice with the alarms is once you set it up with your voice, you can go into the app and you can use the digital crown to make adjustments. So you can see here I have the number 12 highlighted. Well, when that's highlighted, I can use the digital crown to move through and select different values for the alarm. And then the final one is reminders. Again, you can use Siri, use your voice, and set up those reminders. The app is just there to give you a list, and so that you can check off things as you complete them. So those are built in, but there are a couple of other apps that I use to kind of enhance what those built-in apps can do. My favorite, this is how I manage my life, and I highly recommend it. It's an app called Fantastical. It's from a company called FlexiBits. And what I like about Fantastical is that it combines the calendar and reminders in one app. So it's all there. I can see my reminders. I can see all my events. I can use Force Touch. So basically, for those of you that aren't aware, Force Touch is where you kind of press and hold a little bit more firmly. And if I do that, I can then add an event, and I can use just Siri voice recognition to add those events on my watch. So again, it's just combining two apps, so I have less to worry about. It's all in one place. That's what Fantastical does for me: reminders and calendar. And then the other one is Do. And Do it looks like any other reminder app, but what I really like about this one is that it has a nag feature. And I don't mean, well, I guess it is like a parent, me being the parent that's usually doing the nagging these days. But by nagging, I mean that it keeps reminding you. So for instance, if you set it to remind you every 5 minutes, it will keep reminding you to, go in and sort of dismiss that reminder. So if it's something really important, like taking medication, this is a good app for that. That's what I use it for, because I'm supposed to take my medication in the morning, right? And in the morning, I'm not all that alert, or sometimes I don't want to be that alert. So I will typically, just like I do with my alarm clock, hit the button a few times. And so it's nice to have this app that keeps coming back and reminding you, you've got to do this. Another app that I use quite a bit, and this is more for the sort of like absent-minded part of me, the part that's always, if I put something into a sticky, it's probably going to get lost. So this is a Memos app. I can use my voice to record a memo. It's not using Siri, so it's not sort of transcribing things. It's an actual recording, and that recording then gets transferred over to the iPhone, or there's also a companion Mac app. So basically, it's a really simple app. It just shows you a big microphone on the screen. You tap on it, you record your voice, and then you can listen to it back by tapping the play button. So it's nice to have that ability to just save information whenever it occurs to you, right? So you don't have to wait until you pull out that phone from your pocket, because it may seem like a simple thing, right? Reaching into your pocket, but it could be that something gets in the way of you actually doing that, reaching into your pocket and getting the phone, and then you forget, and that information is lost. So having an app like this that allows you to really quickly take a voice memo down, it's really helpful. Are there any OneNote fans out there? So this is a great app from Microsoft. It's available for a number of platforms, but I use it on the iPhone, obviously, because then I can also get the extension for the Apple Watch. And with OneNote, you can create really simple notes, and then those notes will get transferred over to the iPhone version of the app. So you can see there, I've created a really simple one for an address that I might need while I'm taking a trip or something like that, and that I may be referring to, several times. And this one uses Siri, so you can just save that note with your voice, and then it gets converted into text. So I'm always looking for things like OneNote, Google Keep, even though as far as I'm aware, it doesn't have an Apple Watch app, but it's another one of those apps that works across a number of different platforms. So I can access that information in a variety of different ways. These are a few other ones that I've tried, but they haven't really stuck. And that's okay. It's okay to try out a number of apps, and then if it doesn't work for you, maybe it doesn't have the features that you need, or it just could be that the interface, it's not what you need. Like the interface may be too confusing, or a few times, the colors of the interface were an issue for me. I couldn't really see it very well. So there are a number of reasons why an app may not work for you. So Clear, Todoist, and Timewinder. Of these three, the one that I've had the most success with is Timewinder. And I'll just share a strategy with you that I use to get some of my work done. And it's called the Pomodoro technique. So I will type that into the chat area so that we're all on the same page. Maybe. Let's see if I can. There we go, the Pomodoro technique. And basically what that is you can set up intervals that, you're going to work for, say, 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. You're going to work again for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. So you can take, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to work for 3 hours, which might be a little bit intimidating, you can just break that task down into 25-minute increments, right? And so once you do 3 or 4 of these 25-minute intervals, then you take a longer break and you kind of recharge your batteries. Because remember, things like executive functioning, they're not unlimited, right? Working memory is not unlimited. There are some limitations. So with the Pomodoro technique, I've adjusted it for myself because I do a lot of writing. And so I do 50 minutes. I'll do 50 minutes and then I'll take a 10-minute break. And I'll do about 3 of those, and then I'll take, say, a 25-minute break and recharge my batteries. So I've taken that long period of work and I've broken it down to something that's a little bit more manageable. So Ana Maria just shared, well, whoever's on Ana Maria's account, just share the link that will take you to learn more about the Pomodoro technique. It's a really powerful productivity technique. Here's a tip that I learned from Jamie Knight. If you don't know Jamie, you should definitely follow him on Twitter. It's at Jamie Knight, Knight. And he's an autistic web developer at the BBC. So he develops websites and web applications for the BBC, and he's a person with autism. So this is a great tip. Is he's using the different watch faces on the Apple Watch as a way to sort of plan his day. So he has an Apple Watch face for play, which is the Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse. And by the way, in case you don't know, you can turn on spoken time for those two, for the Minnie and Mickey Mouse. So you can basically tap the screen with 2 fingers and it will speak the time with Mickey or Minnie's voice, of course. I wish they would add it for the other characters because I really want Buzz Lightyear to say the time to me. But alas, for now, it's just Minnie and Mickey. So he's got that one for playtime. Then he's got a really simple one, which is the extra large watch face. That's one that I use sometimes just because it's easier for me to see. But for him, this removes a lot of the other elements on the screen. So he's just focused on, what time is it? How much time do I have left? And then he's got another one that's his morning one, and it basically has all the things he needs in the morning. A timer, maybe it's a timer for preparing breakfast or something like that, what's happening in his day, the date, and then the little home icon there is for controlling his lights, which I'll mention in just a second. The other tip at the bottom I've included is you can send playlists over to your Apple Watch. And so what he's done is basically he wears headphones all the time just for sort of controlling the noise around them. And so he's created an audio playlist that it basically functions just like a visual schedule. It just walks him through the steps of what he has to perform at a specific point in time. So I think that's a genius way to use the Apple Watch as a way to keep you on track. From what everybody said, most of you are interested in the Apple Watch or have Apple Watches already. But just be aware that a lot of these apps are either have a version for Android Wear, or Android Wear has similar apps like Todoist, Google Keep, or if you like, just press record. There's one for Android Wear called Wear Audio Recorder. So again, it allows you to take those voice memos so you don't lose that information. And the same thing for Tizen. So if you're one of those people that got a Samsung, you're a Samsung person, you have a Samsung phone, a Samsung TV, you just like Samsung. You have either built-in features like alarms and reminders, or you can find apps like My Tasks so that you can keep track of your to-dos using your watch. So I focus primarily on executive functioning. We have just a few more minutes, but I want to mention a few things just really quickly. There's an app called Proloquo Go. It's a really robust communication app, and it too has an Apple Watch component. You can either use preset phrases, and this is one of those apps that supports the speech component of the Apple Watch. So with those preset phrases, you can tap with 2 fingers and it will actually read that content out loud. Or you can use a phrase builder that's built into it. And with the phrase builder, you'll select different categories on the watch, and then using the digital crown, you can build a phrase that can then be read out loud by the Apple Watch. Or you can just kind of turn the watch. If you notice that it's the opposite of what you would expect, and the reason for that is that when you get to the, say, the coffee shop, you can bring up that phrase and then just kind of flick your watch towards the person in front of you, and they'll be able to read it. That's why it's reversed. And then something that I'm really big into is home automation. I have Hue lights all over the place. I have them in this room that I'm in right now. And I can either use Siri on my Apple Watch to turn the lights on and off, or I can open the Home app on the Apple Watch, and I can do things like turn the lights on, turn them off, dim them, so if I don't want it to be too bright, and then I can also change the color. So the Apple Watch is basically the controller for my connected lights, if you will. And the company that I use is Hue, and it's primarily because it's supported by everything that I have. It's supported by my Apple devices, by my Amazon Echo, by my Google Home. If anybody decides to break into any of these things, I'm going to be in trouble because I'm trying to be as connected as possible. A couple of things that will help you get more out of your Apple Watch. First is the band. I struggle with the first one that I got was the plastic one that's for sports. That's really difficult to clasp on and off. And so the nylon one from Apple, I found that to be really easy to put on and off. It's really, really light as well. And then if you're traveling a lot and you don't want to take that charger, there are a number of batteries out there. This is the one that I use from a company called Zens, Z-E-N-S. And it's great. It lasts. It allows me to get a whole weekend out of my Apple Watch without taking the extra long cable that's kind of heavy. So again, I'm going to leave a few minutes here for any questions. I'm going to go through the chat, see what kinds of questions you have. Those of you that are using the Apple Watch, if you can share some stories as well, I would love to hear success stories or challenges. But in the meantime, here's the link again to the Apple Watch app matrix that Stacy and I have put together for you. So let's see what we have in the chat. The last screen that I'm going to share with you is if you want to connect with me or if you want to share anything you learned tonight with the rest of the community, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at IonAccess. So that's one way you can connect with me or if you have questions. So Kelly says in Maine, that's great. You've found a way to get some waivers that pay for this type of AT. Again, it's not for everybody, but it can make a big difference in terms of, independence and being able to access information in a different way. Just a reminder from Ana Maria, we will have the recording of the webinar This will be downloadable. You also have the matrix as one of your handouts. You have the handout itself that has links to all of the devices and the apps that I mentioned. So if you've kind of missed that something, no worries. You can go back and review and you can access that.
Hi, this is Todd from CTD. We always love feedback. Thank you, Luis, for such a great webinar with so many great resources. We always appreciate feedback from anybody who has anything to say, good or bad. If you can click the SurveyMonkey link there, it helps us know what you thought about today's webinar. You can also tell us what you're looking for in the future. And then for those of you who are looking for a certificate of participation after you've completed the survey, you can download that as well. Luis, unless you have anything else, thank you so much. I thought this was, go ahead.